I'm
This meeting is being recorded.
on, you guys. There's so many rules to life these days. So you've now consented to be recorded and in this Zoom. But good afternoon. I am so pleased to be here. I am Zooming into you all from Atlanta. So it's about 1 o'clock here. And Victoria's in Edinburgh. We'll get to that in a minute. But I just wanted to introduce myself and say my name is Tanya Sam. I'm the host of the Tanya Time Book Club. I'm a bibliophile, sort of geeky fashionista girl, tech investor, media personality. Some of you may know me from the Real Housewives of Atlanta, where I say that my tagline should have been, I prefer to read books, not people. Hey, here we are, and I'm doing something that I really love. So I'm very thrilled to be in conversation today with Victoria E. Schwab, the New York Times best-selling author of our book this month, The Invisible Life of Addie Larue. She's also written over 20 other books, including children's books, teenage books, YA, young adult books, the Shades of Magic series, Vicious, Gallant, so many of them. So I know many of you are very familiar with her. And many of you, this was a first-time introduction. And I feel like we just fell in love with you. We fell in love with Addie. And it was sort of a different venture for us. I tried to pick books and be very intentional about walking through different walks of life. And for us, that means not trying to deviate from what you would normally read, your comfort zones. And I think this book was a perfect example because it combined, fantasy, some Faustian bargains. We're talking to, the devil with a small g, a shadow, all these little things really were nuanced to us. And the most beautiful part about this book was, I feel like when a book sort of traps your heart, traps your spirit, traps your soul, and takes you to other places, as we walked through Addie's shoes, Henry's shoes, and got to know Luke, it was such a beautiful journey for us. And your writing, more than anything. So many people messaged us to say, as we join in the book club and as we explore this book, just the prose was so beautiful. So that was such a gift to us. And Victoria, I'm just going to pause now and welcome you to our book club.
Thank you, Tanya. This is maybe like the most flattering introduction. My cheeks are red from it. Thank you so much.
Should be. Our book club, like, you are really our rock stars. I just want to take 1 minute, if everyone can unmic for 1 second. And I just want to welcome you. I want you to hear our cheers. So unmic, say hello. Welcome to book club, you guys. It's a party today. And hi, welcome everyone.
I think
hi.
Hi. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Can I just
Welcome,
say,
Toronto.
Thank you. I love your concept of reading widely because I have this philosophy in life, basically, that for every book I pick up that I think that I will like, I make sure that I pick up one that I have absolutely no idea if it's for me. Yes. I think that's like the way that we discover, it's great to read inside your comfort zone. It's great to read things and know that you'll love them. But I think the best discoveries I've made as a reader are ones that are outside my comfort zone or outside my line of thinking. And as a writer, in case any of you are writers as well, it's that's our creative cross-pollination. That's how we find our own voice.
Yes, absolutely. And, I think also too, as we've come through all this social justice changes, one of the best ways I think to walk in other people's shoes and see their journey is through fiction and writing. So we have a lot of fun here. We have great discussion and we're just super pleased to have you here. So I just want to kick it off by saying one thing. If you guys don't follow Victoria on Instagram, she is amazing. And I feel like we really know each other as, this whole idea of what are parasocial norms of how you really meet people, but check her out and follow on Instagram. And so she is coming to us from Edinburgh, Scotland, where she lives. Yes. And I just want to kick this off just so that you guys know, if you have not been in Tanya Time Book Club on the Zoom, spoilers are allowed. We read section by section of our chosen book and we talk about all the themes. So we've gone into word by word sometimes some of your books. So spoilers are allowed. And I'm just going to kick it off and open it up. We're going to ask you a couple questions and then I invite my book clubbers to raise their hands and ask questions. This is really about a time where you guys can dive in and get to ask Victoria all the pressing questions from this book and other book. But I just want to start off, Victoria, and we're going to get right into the themes. Addie Larue came out in 2020. We had a bit of a pandemic, and now there's this continual excitement and fervor about this book and so many of the other books that you're writing. But I want you to start off, and if you could tell us what drove you to write this book. You've been writing for years, but just give us the inside scoop on like where Addie came from.
Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah, so I got the idea for it when I was 23 and I finished it when I was 33. So it was a long time. I wrote 19 books in between. So I was obviously doing other things, but I've always been attracted to the kind of inner darkness, to this idea of what keeps us going, what motivates us. I've written books where villains are the protagonists, and that inner darkness that we're exploring is ourselves. And in this case, I wanted to explore the desire that we have as creatives to be remembered. There's this sense of this immortality complex that a lot of creatives have. And there's a lot of ego that goes with it. And I found myself having these conversations over the years about what it means to be remembered, about how we want our work to be remembered. And that would go on to play into the story as I was creating it. But the very first seeds actually came from, yes, wanting to write a Faustian bargain tale, and specifically a gender swapped Faustian bargain tale, because I was fascinated by the idea that, like, when you see these classic Faustian bargains or vampiric narratives that we end up with an immortal, it tends to be men. Yep. It tends to be straight white men, or I don't know. I don't believe in straight vampires. That's a different thing, but like it tends to be white men. And the thing is that when you take a white man and you make him immortal, he still gets to move through time in this body that gives him the most agency that society affords. Wow. And so I was fascinated on this idea of, okay, but if you did a Faustian bargain and you made a woman immortal, how does that change the dynamic of the way that she moves through the world? Because yes, she's liberated from death, but she's still moving through a world that has a very strict set of expectations on what she should be allowed to do. So that's one aspect. But another aspect was that at the time when I first got the idea for the story, my grandmother had dementia. Mm-hmm. And I was never close with my grandmother. I wasn't afforded that luxury. She wasn't well my whole life. But my mother is my best friend. And so from my perspective, I was not watching my grandmother forget. I was watching my mother be forgotten. And that was one of the most horrifying experiences as someone for whom their mother is their best friend. It was such a painful thing to watch, and it was such a fearful thing to possess. And so that's really where it started, is this idea of who are we, not when we forget, but when we are forgotten by others. And so those were kind of like the cruxes. Obviously, would go on to be a lot more, to be about many more things, to be about art and artist and everything that gets forgotten in the pursuit of creating a final piece of work, all the inspiration, all of the work outside of the frame, so to speak. But those initial inspirations were obviously about memory and about moving through the world in a specific form.
There's a quote, and I have it here. Why would anyone trade a lifetime of talent for a few years of glory? Luke's smile darkens, because time is cruel to all, and crueler still to artists, because vision weakens, voice withers, talent fades, because happiness is brief and history is lasting. And in the end, everyone wants to be remembered. And like, I literally get goosebumps, because this feels like it intros us to this whole idea of this Faustian bargain. What is a lifetime? What is legacy? What is to be remembered? Exactly. And the story goes on from there. But I want to dive into, in your mind, is this a love story? A Faustian bargain?
Yeah.
How do you see it?
Oh, first of all, I love that quote. Makes me so happy, because it's like one of the first ones that I wrote. And what I like about it is that the purpose of the story is to unpick that narrative, because that's Luke's concept. That's the devil's concept for why Addie is susceptible to this deal. Also, sorry, I have two kittens and they are like just trying to make a mess off screen. They are trying to scratch furniture. Okay, come here. Say hello and then go away. Okay? Oh, say hello and go away. Anyway, and so I will unpick that narrative. But sorry, I just had to say that about the quote. As far as whether this is a love story, I very strongly believe it's not. I believe it has a lot of sexual tension. I believe it has a lot of chemistry. I believe it has a lot of intimacy. But to me, it cannot be a love story, because it's two dynamics. It's self-destruction and it's an almost platonic intimacy. Because the fact is that what Luke and Henry have is beautiful. Mm-hmm. But Henry is a a waypoint in Addie's history. He is a brief interlude, and they are driven together by these forces, and they need each other. They find themselves in each other, but in that way, they're more mirrors. They are showing each other what they need and what they want to see. And I think that their story would be just as potent without sex. I don't think it needs to be romantic. I think it's romanticized. And then with Luke, it is a story of seduction and self-destruction. And it is the power dynamics there, I don't believe, allow for a love story. Also, the argument that Addie makes, which is obviously then an argument that I'm making on Addie's behalf, is that I don't know that Luke is capable of love. Would he be capable of love in another 100 years? Quite possibly, because he's evolving toward humanity and Addie is evolving away from humanity. Like, he's a static force, really. And these gods with lowercase g's, these old gods, they're seen as kind of like immovable. They're not infallible like a god with a capital G, but they're static. They are intransigent. And then upon meeting Addie, Luke becomes an object in motion. He's essentially inertia, right? Object at rest stays at rest, object in motion stays in motion. He becomes in motion. And over those 3 centuries, I always like to think it's like he's playing house, like he's playing dress up.
Yes.
Like he takes this manifestation, this visage that he ends up wearing then more and more and more throughout history, to the point where by the time he meets Henry, he's already wearing this again. And he almost becomes addicted to this act of playing house, this domesticity with Addie. And I think we could continue to track it forward and see him become more and more human. But Addie's whole argument is that what he thinks of as love is just possession, because he doesn't have the concept. He hasn't been exposed to it.
I have never thought about about that sort of trajectory where Luke is becoming more human and Addie is becoming more godlike.
Yeah.
Wow. And interesting power piece there. Because it's so funny. And like, we go a lot of different ways in our book club where we'll be like, oh my gosh, we think we can change a man. And
sure.
stuff. And this is really funny. Like, how many years are you going to wait for this person to become who you want? But Addie also, this is a really interesting way to look at it, because the end of the book, and we're going to jump to this, you guys, and I want you to start getting your questions ready, raising your hand, because we'll go through them in order that way. So Addie sort of gives at the end of the book she teases us to be like, well, what's going to happen? Like, I've got your number, Luke. I will win in the end. And so do you think that Addie will surpass Luke in terms of power? Will she be able to really rival him in the end?
I mean, there's a reason the story stops where it does, which is not a non-answer. It's just that I write my books in reverse. So I pick their endings first. So I work backwards from the point I know I want to leave the narrative. And so I have chosen that point, and I've chosen that we don't follow her further than that point. But to extrapolate for a moment, it's not necessarily that I think that Addie invariably becomes more powerful than Luke. She's not a god and she's not a demon, but I feel like she understands his nature better than he understands her nature. And the fact is that like she knows how to play him now. Basically, it's less about becoming more powerful than him and more about having a better read on, as he becomes more human, she will become better at manipulating him and he will become worse at manipulating her. And it's this idea of like, he thinks he wants love. He thinks he wants these human concepts, and she believes that he doesn't. He just doesn't know better. The same way, almost, not to be very nihilistic about it, but the same way, how do I want to put this? Sorry.
Oh, don't filter for us. We can take it.
The same way that Henry served a purpose in Addie's life and helped her get over that desire. Like, Addie was holding on to this desire of being seen and being loved, and then she got it. And now when we are leaving her, she's had it. And like, she now, having been through a system that she was craving, understands what it was for her and what it wasn't. It doesn't fix everything. It doesn't solve everything. It doesn't make her human again. It doesn't do anything. So I think, having come through something that she was coveting for so long, she understands what it is and what it isn't. And now she sees what Luke has been coveting for so long. And she knows that in giving it to him, he will become disabused of giving it.
Brilliant. See, this is why I love the no spoilers chats.
Yeah.
It gives so much of a deeper perspective to this. And I can see in the comments, everyone is using this word selfish.
Yes.
They're asking like, are they selfish?
Yes.
Is Addie
I believe Addie has to be. Like, people use selfish as it has a lot of negative connotation. I think we have to believe that Addie's self-absorbed because she has been put into a situation where she must be. It is very easy to be selfless and altruistic when there is someone else looking out for you. Addie has spent 300 years with no one able to look out for her, with no one able to hold her, to take care of her. And so I think it is completely unrealistic to want her to be anything else. You do not survive the 300 years that Addie has survived by being anything but selfish. Luke has created a prison of one. He has created this void around Addie. Who else is Addie supposed to care about? And this is the thing, I've seen comments where like, oh, why doesn't Addie go, fix slavery? Why doesn't Addie go change the tide of history? I'm like, one, it's not Forrest Gump. Two, Addie is one person trying to be happy. She did not make this deal because she wanted to go and change history. She has blinders on. She's incredibly self-interested and incredibly driven by her own desire for happiness. Yep. That does not make her some great hero. It does not make her some massive player in the socio-political games of history. It doesn't interest her. She just wants to be happy.
And it's so funny because we did talk about this as like, we're a group of like, we're pretty mixed here, but predominantly Black. And I've seen those discussions in forums. I look those things up to see like what are people talking about that. And we actually appreciated that, especially for writers, where this idea where we bring in gender of like, well, are you supposed to be everything? Are you supposed to be Napoleon who's trying to take over the world? I just wanted to survive this curse that she's been put on. And
this is the thing, she still has a huge amount of privilege. She is still she is moving through the world as a femme white woman, right? There is still a massive amount of privilege there. And like, I think it's just that when stories become successful, we think that the story itself needs to be big. Yes. But it's a very small story, and I'm writing about one person. And again, it would be so antithetical to Addie's identity to make her more grandiose than she is. I think it would be heroizing her. That's not a right word, but it would be like putting her on a pedestal that she has not earned, nor does she want, nor does she deserve, because she's not a hero. She's just a person. Yeah. And like, yes, it would be a very different narrative, but also to the flip side of that, then what am I doing? Some kind of like white savior narrative where she enters spaces that are not hers and tries to lift them from the inside. Like, she does small gestures when she gets called into it, like in World War II. But honestly, this is just a universe of one. Right. And she is just trying to survive and like not hit the red out button every single day.
I also appreciate how, this is, I think, speaks to the mastery of your writing, because that was also explained. Like, Addie couldn't keep possession. She couldn't build an army. She couldn't do all those things. So it didn't feel like we had to make a leap of faith to believe that. Yeah. So I appreciate that. I want to talk a little bit, and you guys will open up to questions soon, because we only have Victoria till 1:45, and it's a hard stop. She's on the other side of the world, and it is Sunday. So we're very grateful for your time here. But I want to talk a little bit about Henry. We touched on Luke. We touched on Addie a little bit, but I want to open up the question about Henry and where this character came from. He's got this heart that's like a sieve. It just sort of leaks empathy and sort of melancholy sadness. Yeah. So introduce us to how he sort of showed up in your brain.
So Henry was a disaster for me because I had this story. It's building in my mind over 8-9 years at this point. I know how to write it. I know exactly who Addie is. When I say exactly, it's not that they don't surprise me. It's that I stress test my characters. So I get to the point where I can drop them into a context and understand how they will behave inside it every time. I understand them 3-dimensionally. So I understand Addie and her arc. I understand Luke and his arc. And then I have Henry. And I understand Henry from a plot perspective. I understand the function that he needs to perform in the narrative, and I don't understand who he is as a person. And it starts to really freak me out because I know this is a tripod. And if Henry's side of this tripod is too weak, the system collapses. It must feel like these three figures are holding up this narrative. And so I make the terrible mistake as a fiction writer of breaking off a tiny piece of my personality and handing it to Henry, just to create almost like a shard
Why
of
is this
mirror.
a mistake? This
Well,
should be
because I
brilliant.
don't believe, I never believe in doing like largely autobiographical work in fiction because we sometimes become beholden to the reality instead of the story we want to tell. I also just like don't want to self-examine always that way. I don't want to have to like writing Henry. So what happens, of course, is I start breaking off more and more and more until Henry's just a mirror. And suddenly I know how to write Henry because Henry's me. Henry is who I would have become if I had never found writing. Our paths in life diverge at 19 when I found writing and he doesn't. But all I had to do was keep walking down this road that I was on when I pivoted off it. If I just decided to stay on, I would become Henry. And why not do this? Because it sucked. Because writing things like The Worst Night of Henry's Life, which happens two ways, obviously, the one where he stops at the bottom of the stairs and the one where he goes to the edge of the roof, like I had to write those things and I had to write them for myself. And it's one thing to take that and, you know, dress it up in the guise of somebody drastically different from you, where this is your only common connection. It was so much harder to write Henry as knowing that I was just writing who I would have been and what I would have struggled with if I hadn't had the anchor of writing. And so I'm very proud of Henry. To this day, he's the only character that I feel protective of. Like, obviously, I'd never say it. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions. I'm a firm believer. I'm the kind of author who believes like once the book is done, it belongs to everyone who's reading it. It becomes their conversation, not mine. So I'm very much at peace with people not liking my books because I know it's about finding the people who do. But I, on the inside, die a little bit every time someone doesn't like Henry. I'm like, oh, it hurts. Like it hurts right there. So normally I break off much smaller pieces of anchorage than I did with Henry. But Henry, yeah, Henry is me.
Oh, I thank you for sharing that. That is really beautiful. And I understand that Henry was just lovable. I feel like in this book club. Yeah, people are saying like I really liked Henry because you just felt a sort of soft spot for him. But I think also once we broke it down to he was in that searching millennial phase, we had so much more empathy for him. Like this, so many of us.
I also am a very, very big believer in like my masculine and male characters showing emotion. I think that there's like so much continuous, like we talked before, Tanya, about like books being an empathy engine, but like so often they're an opportunity to help like teach young readers and readers who aren't in touch with some piece of themselves how to be better at themselves, how to be better at life, how to like move through the world. And I think that like I really like making sure that I give characters that present in traditionally masculine ways the opportunity and the incentive to show fragility.
Oh, that's beautiful. That is definitely Henry. Okay, we had a couple questions. Gio, did I say that right? Please, you can and ask your question. Welcome to book club.
Thank you. And hi, my name is Joa Rika. I have only one question. Will Henry ever recover her memory from his memories from Addie or Addie? I will ask this because the end of the book is like, I don't know, he remembers her. I don't know how to explain this, but I think he will recover his memories because of the end of the book. So I love your books and your cats too. And that's it.
Thank you. I mean, he does remember her. That's how he's able to write this book. So he kind of becomes the only one aside from Luke who retains the memory. The question really is, will he, as all humans do, begin to forget? Because that's like the scariest thing, is that the moment that somebody is out of our life, ostensibly permanently, I mean, we don't know, their paths could cross again, but the moment someone is out of our life, by simple, unless we have eidetic memories, unless we're very, very uniquely touched in that way, like the scariest thing that happens is we do begin to forget. The edges of memory softens. One of the reasons I write things down compulsively is to try and stem that fear. But I mean, I do think Henry's memory is not Addie's. Addie's memory is perfect. Addie remembers everything. Henry doesn't. And if he's anything like me, who I gave him, I made him, I have a terrible memory. It scares me. I have a terrible memory for faces. I have a terrible memory for like voice, all these different details. And I sometimes walk through and just wish I could like walk around recording everyone I love all the time, because it scares me so much. And the fact is, Henry has no way to record what Addie looked like or sounded like to him. So he is truly like walking in sand when it comes to her memory, and he will forget.
It's funny because I also agree, and people are saying like, I admire people who have these like photographic, just catalog type memories, because I don't think I do, but I also think it makes me a very free spirit. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, it helps you. I don't know. I move through entire chapters of my life and I can let them go very easily.
Yes.
Because like they're done and I'm already forgetting them. I'm a much more Peter Pan than, or much more. Yeah. But it still scares me when I do want to remember somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. Jamie Lee, I think I saw you had a hand up. Do you still have a question? You can unmic. Where did you go?
There you go. I'm unmuting myself.
Hi.
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 Hi, Victoria. So I've absolutely adore your books, and I've read everything that you've done. I basically love the way that you write, I suppose you could say, morally grey characters.
Yes.
So they're never either wholly good or wholly evil, as you mentioned with Addie, who's obviously, she's very selfish. I just wanted to say, like, how do you find like getting that balance just right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think like I'm not interested in writing characters. I'm interested in writing people. Like that's such a weird, trite thing to say, but it's like one of the reasons I compulsively listen to interview format podcasts. I compulsively listen to memoirs. I compulsively read autobiographies. I am not interested in writing characters that feel archetypal. I want to write individuals. I think that it's so important. And the fact is that like, when I think of it that way, it's easy for me to write morally gray characters because there's not a real person that exists out there that is all good or all bad. Like we are so much, maybe the better answer is to say that like, I build them from the ground up. I build their childhoods. I build their traumas. I build their bad decisions. I build their crossroads. I build the moments that made them. Like I build their settings. We are so much a product of our environment. We are a product of our upbringing, whether we go with it or rebel against it. All of these things that form us, I'm looking for the conflict in their past that made them who they are right now. Because then I'll be able to roll them forward and see how they will make choices going forward in time once I understand who they were to get to this point.
That is beautiful. Okay, this is just an aside to that. Does that make you like the best friend relationship visionary? Like, I feel like you could just meet people and be like, I understand how you're going to fit into my life. Cause this feels brilliant.
I mean, I'm a terrible, it makes me a bad person. Like I genuinely like people enter my life and I'm like, oh, I know who you are. I'm a very good read of character, but it also makes it a very hard human. Like I mean, it's not hard like for them, but it's usually hard. I'm very much in my own head all the time because I'm very good at like that predictive element. I can usually be like, oh, I can see where you are going to struggle, or I can see how this relationship is going to play out, or I can see like what your triggers are going to be for like specific things, usually before the other person does. But I think that's just because so much of writing is observing.
Yeah.
like so much of writing people, believable people, is just almost like not dedicating your life to the act of craft so much as dedicating your life to like the act of observation and trying really hard to capture. I think it's also aided by the fact that going back to having a bad memory, I am like nearly face blind. Like I've practiced really hard to be able to like recognize people, so it's not like a complete face blindness, but I struggle. And because I don't do very well with like your ordinary visual cues, it's one of the reasons that like outerwear and like attributes like the freckles or the coats or the shoe, these things work in my books for me as a shorthand for myself. But it makes me, I think, better at not getting hung up in someone's physical appearance. So I tend to like move past a physical appearance very quickly and start getting to like but what makes you tick and what makes you mad and why do you have like this compulsion to do X or Y or Z? Like, where is your control factor button?
Oh, fascinating. I've got 2 questions here that came up in the chat, and then if anyone else has a question, please raise your hand. Carol Kelly is asking about the art, and this was a huge theme in the book. It was a way that Addie was able to like leave her mark on the world, sorry, but she was like, can you please talk about the art? Is this how it foreshadowed each chapter? And I also want to know, are you an artist?
My background is in art and art history. So undergraduate was in art and graduate degree was in art history. Interestingly, like talking about revision and the fact that like what you put down on paper is not the same as what becomes the final work. The works of art are obviously integrated into the story, but the way that they sit at the beginning of each section didn't happen until revision. I made those all up at the beginning of each part to try and like almost set, yes, a foreshadowing cue for some of the themes that were going to be explored in the section after it. So it's like you can take it or leave it, but it might add an extra little flavoring to what happens after. But yeah, I'm just, again, as a creator, really interested in the art behind the art, so to speak. And what I mean by that is like, you know, we can talk about it from a book standpoint as inspiration, or the work that goes onto the page that never actually goes onto the page or that gets culled back out by the time. There's like the book as it exists for me, which is the product of 10 years, multiple drafts, a lot of erasing and reproducing and rearranging. And then there's the book as it exists for you, which is the final product. And you will never see everything that went into it. You will only see the final product. And that is the case for every work of art. Yes, there can be like documentation because of the time we live in for process and work in progress. But in general, you walk into a gallery or a museum or a space and you see a piece of art on the wall, and you do not get to see anything except the art that is on the wall. And that's the thing that I'm so interested by, is like, but the art that's on the wall is just the punctuation mark on the entire story that somebody was telling to get there. And so I'm just really interested in this idea of like the muse and inspiration and almost like the layering, the underpainting of the art.
Beautiful. And I think this touches on a question, and then Ulysses, I might have said that wrong. Mr. Nazadine asked, like, was there a part in the book that was erased, but that you wanted? And I feel like it's such a loaded question, because there's so much of this book that's about erasure and
yeah.
idea. I mean, use the word, say it for me, palimpsest.
Palimpsest. I know. I like saw a meme online that was like, say palimpsest one more time. And I was like, it's fair. I think it's in the book like 7 times. That one's on me. But yes, the underwriting or the overwriting, palimpsest is a text that has been overwritten by another text so that the thing underneath it is no longer legible. And yeah, I've got distracted by thinking about that meme. Sorry, the question though. Oh, the erasure. Yeah. No whole part, but there are certain pieces of character that became the underpainting. And one of my favorite examples to give is Luke. And this is a thing, somebody pointed out that Luke has a very specific cadence for talking. And there's a reason for it. And it's because when I was first conceiving of Luke in the early days, different version of the book, I imagined that every time Luke met Addie on their anniversary, he would announce his presence by reciting a line of poetry that was contemporary to the time period. And it wasn't as great in execution as it was in concept. But the first one that I came up with that I used for him was "Come away with me and be my love." And the thing that I love about "Come away with me and be my love," aside from it being just like an absolutely perfect sentence, is that it's not a question.
Oh,
Not a request, it's a command. And that phrase, "Come away with me and be my love," became almost the like cadence underpinning for every single line of dialogue that I wrote for Luke in the entire book. So the poetry went away, but "Come away with me and be my love" became the score in my head when I was writing Luke.
oh my gosh, this is why these book clubs are invaluable. It's so beautiful. I feel like we really got just a beautiful piece of magic from there.
Thank you.
Ulysses, can you unmic and ask your question, and please tell me how to say your name?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, my name is pronounced Urshol, and it is the Latin form of the Greek name Ulysses. Although I'm not Latin, but that's
I love this.
I
This is
would never. Can
incredible.
you say it again, Urshel?
Urshol.
Okay, thank you.
Amazing.
Beautiful. All
Like
right.
phonetically, yeah.
Yeah.
And Netson is the pronunciation of my last name.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I just got in a little late because of extenuating factors, reasons. But I don't know if you've covered this or anyone has asked you this, but you say with your memory, so you can't remember faces and things like that. You don't have a photographic mindset or anything. So is that like a projection of yourself regarding the young lady in the book who doesn't remember, no one ever remembers her?
I think it's my fear, if that makes sense. Like I work very hard to remember people. What's interesting is I remember identically almost every word I've ever written, but I'm not very good at remembering reality. And I'm particularly poor at remembering faces, at remembering people that I've met. People will come up to me and I'm like, "Oh, so nice to meet you." And they're like, "We have met 7 times." And I'm like, "This is not a you problem. This is a me problem." I now say, "Oh, nice to see you," just in case we've met before. I don't know if it's a me being real shit at reality and like being so engrossed in my work that I'm just not very good at like, I have to make it a concerted effort. But to your point, I think I have a lot of fear around memory. I think I have a lot of fear around my own failing of memory. I'm an only child, and that means I am the sole holder of memory for my family. And that scares me. Like being alone in possession of memory scares me. One of my very first novels I ever wrote was called The Archived, and it was about a library where the dead are shelved like books. And it was like spawned from this fear that like you could live an entire life and then it's just forgotten. You forget everything you know, everything you learned, every memory you had. And so I think so much of what I write about is about some way to preserve, to the point even when I sit down to write a novel, even though I have the whole thing mapped out and I have the whole story, that story, until the first draft is down on paper, lives exclusively in my head. And the fear that I feel is like when you're running downhill and you realize that you can't actually stop, you just like need to commit to the act of tipping forward, because like I have so much fear that I will forget if I don't get it all down on paper in some way. I will leave my notes for myself everywhere in every kind of medium, just in case. I leave chaos notes. It would be so great if I just wrote it all in one document. Instead, it's like, here's 24 documents. Now it's like a breadcrumb trail for myself. But it all comes down to this distrust, I would say, of my own capacity for memory.
So it's more of a projection as well as a deflection combined.
Yeah, the thing I love about Addie, the thing I wish I had, the one piece of wish fulfillment for her, is that she remembers everything. She has a completely flawless memory. It's part of her curse. Yeah. Is that like it would be so much easier if she didn't, right? If she can't go mad. She tries to go mad like a few times, but she cannot lose herself. She can't blur her mind in that way. It's too present. It's too sharp. And I feel like every vice I've ever had in life deals with this sense of like, of being afraid that things will not be crystalline for me, being afraid that things will not like hold together in my mind before I can transmute them.
I see. And my other question is this: what are you working on a certain? What is your projected goal? Maybe this has been it, this particular book, but I'm asking in general because every artist, whether they're doing a piece on art like your book, your novel, or say visual art or whatever, a musician, what is your ultimate goal? And what I mean by ultimate goal is, do you have a project that you're working on or that you would like to work on, that you like to get into, that will just be your aha, or
Yes.
just the just
I
your
mean,
just your summit of
I hope not, Urshel. Like, I hope not, because I think in a lot of ways I thought that it was Addie. And I think by virtue of the fact that Addie took 10 years to write, that is to this day the longest that a book has taken me. But I obviously, I'm 35 and I would like to keep writing for a while. And so nothing frightens me more than the concept of reaching that summit. And so what I try and do is I try and set a different summit for each book. And it's not a matter of going higher and higher and higher peaks. It's a matter of setting a different landscape for myself, a different challenge for myself. And for about 6 to 8 months after Addie Larue was finished, I feared I had found my summit. And it sent me into one of the worst depressions of my life, because I thought, oh, I guess I can just stop writing now. Like, I guess I just don't need anything. And that's like the fear. That's why climbers are constantly seeking out harder peaks, not higher peaks. So I set a different goal for myself, and I set a different audience for each book, an audience of one, but it's a slightly different person, so that I'm never trying to repeat myself and I'm never trying to appeal to the exact same version of myself, because I know that my books will appeal differently to different readers. I have done that on purpose. I'm 22 books in and none of them are meant to appeal to the exact same person. But I think the only goal I have is to set a personal challenge with each narrative and then meet that challenge. It has nothing to do with reader reception. Obviously, I want to be successful so that I can keep doing this. But the challenge is something that is so deeply internal that it goes into that underpainting. It goes into that backdrop in a way that hopefully nobody else will ever notice. They will just see a good story. I have set the challenge for myself.
Oh, I love that. We only have a couple minutes left, and I need to talk about
Rapid fire.
2 themes here. Number one, all your books, Shades of Magic, and if you guys have not read it, like, you will fall in love. I think that's the way I was first introduced to you, but have these themes of magic, the way you can use power, you can twist power. And I think that's something that really attracts people. So I want to know, number one, what attracted you to writing about magic and these themes and these worlds? And then can you sort of segue us into what you're working on and what's coming next? Because that's really
magic for me, or any form of power. My books always have a form of power. Every form of power in my books is a way to show off the flaws of the person. I mean, the idea is that, like, power does not make us better. Power invariably makes us worse. Ooh. Like, when you hand a human power, it never makes them a morally better person. It's usually an enabling aspect for a grievance that they have, for some way that they feel wronged or slighted. I wrote an entire series about that called Vicious. But for the Shades of Magic series, it was specifically about power that we're handed and what we do with it, and the entitlement that happens when we're born with a power versus taking a power. And specifically, Shades of Magic is about 4 repetitions of the same world that each have a different relationship to magic. So our world where magic was forgotten, one world where magic was worshipped, one world where magic was restricted and bound, and one world where magic got so strong it consumed everything. So I'm really looking at, like, magic and power. These are all just meant to help analyze people. They're just helped to analyze our highs and our lows, our strengths and our weaknesses, our corruptions, and the ways that we would use power to our own ends. What I'm working on next is, I like to call it, like, the dark sibling for Addie Larue. Addie Larue is a book about optimism, about relentless optimism, about stubborn hope. And my next book is another kind of Faustian tale, but it is a proper vampire tale. It is about 3 women over the course of history and how their lives and deaths intertwine. I like to call it my toxic lesbian vampires. It is basically, it is hunger and rage. It is about,
oh, so vampire, hunger and rage.
yeah, it is about the anger, but the unique anger of being a woman, and specifically one closeted or trying to break out of the closet, and what happens when hunger and rage and time intersect. And it's really about being collateral damage in somebody else's epic love story.
For some reason, if you guys haven't watched this, but I feel like we talked about this, this is like beef.
Yes.
So if you haven't seen the Netflix, where it's just like actually women who are able to like enrage, like women are never supposed to be angry or mad.
No.
Express it. So imagine, ooh, I love this. I love this.
It's hunger and rage. And so it's like, it's going to be a very dark sibling for Addie. It's a standalone novel. And yeah, that's what I'm working on right now.
That's what you're currently working on. And what books, you have a book that will come out?
Yes. The Fragile Threads of Power, which is in the Shades of Magic universe. But you can start with it. Or you could spend the summer. I'm doing a read along all summer of the first 3 books in the Shades of Magic series on YouTube. And like, so you could join me. The Fragile Threads of Power comes out late September.
Oh my goodness, Victoria, thank you so much.
Thank
Guys,
you.
This book club doesn't end. Victoria's going to leave us and we sit here, we after party, we're going to talk about everything more because I feel like you've just literally lit up every neuron in our brains.
Thank you. Thank you for having me so much. And Tanya, you're just an absolute joy.
Oh, no, I just have so much fun here. Can you please share with everyone what your Instagram is so that they can also find you, follow you? They might join in your read along.
Yes, please do. Please join it because it's I'm going to be filming like 16 videos. It's so much. Yeah, it's just VE Schwab on Instagram. That is the best place to find me. It's where I post about everything. It's just the name that's in my little tag on Instagram, all one word. And thank you all so much. And thank you, Tanya, for hosting this. And I can't wait to see some of you soon.
Thank you, everyone. You guys, I'm capturing a little screenshot right here before she leaves. So smile if your camera's on. If you're not, your face looks beautiful. Thank you so much, Victoria, and have a wonderful Sunday in Edinburgh. Bye. Bye, Victoria.
Bye.
Thank you. All right, book clubbers. I am going to, please, you can take off your mics. This is where we go a little bit, you know, almshouse crazy. How amazing. How amazing. And how this works for those of you who aren't in here. We get about another hour where we get to talk, we get to discuss, sort of like when we're on Instagram. You can take off your mics, you know, we're very ordered people, so we don't try and talk over, but how fabulous is Victoria?
She was amazing.
She was amazing. We said it at the same time.
I mean, she's just.
I wanted more time with her. She was really good. I wanted more time.
I wanted more time. And I know, like, you know, I feel like we were all in there just sucking up the knowledge and everything that she was putting down, that even the questions were few because you just wanted to hear her talk. So I wish we had more time with her, but we will, I think we should, I would like to her another piece, but I just want to start off. How many of you were like mic drop when she said Addie was becoming more godlike and Luke was becoming more human-like? I didn't actually think about that in the concept of how she created these characters, but that just was incredible to me. And it's so obvious, but to hear her say it, I got it. It made the whole new paradigm shift for how this is going to be. Any thoughts on this? Anyone?
I felt like, Tanya, it's Robin Johnson. I felt like that was made apparent towards the end of the book. Didn't Addie say something to that regard?
I don't know if I remember her saying it. I remember feeling like she had this number and she had more power, but I never looked at Addie as becoming like God, like she's going to live forever. How do you become a God? That just, I don't know, hearing her say it really sunk into me in a different way.
True.
I feel like this is Jasmine L. She was, I feel like towards the end of the book when she was like accepting that she no longer was a part of the human experience, and she was like understanding her and Luke's role together, like that's when she was becoming more godlike. And I feel like she was making Luke a little less powerful in a God sense where he was becoming more human, like needing for someone and longing for someone. Those are human emotions.
Human. Yeah, absolutely. Bianca, you can unmic. Come on in. You got a comment.
Hi, I apologize if I sound a little funny. I have bronchitis right now, but this was such like a beautiful sick day surprise. But regarding that comment, I feel like this one of my favorite moments in the book that I really feel like this paradigm is present is the church by the beach. When Luke comes to visit Addie, and there's something in that scene where, you know, Addie looks at him and challenges him and says, you can check in on me in another 100 years. Like, I'm not going anywhere. And you just see Luke kind of start to crack a little bit. And I feel like that's when you start to see Addie kind of come into this more godlike position. Yep. And Luke go into this human-like position, because you see Luke really wants her to cave in. And she stands her ground. She's like, I'm not going anywhere. And that's always been one of my favorite scenes, because she just looks him dead in the eye and is like, watch me. Yes. And you see her take this power, and I'm like, oh my goodness, she's gone beyond the human realm to be able to look this godly figure in the eye and challenge him like that, rather than just do anything that he says. That's always been one of my favorite scenes. And hearing Victoria say that, I was like, that makes so much sense for the church scene.
And I just, it's so fascinating to me how this little girl, like we talked about it, she was 3 and 20, way ahead of her time. You know, from where she went, where she was like, I know I can't live this life. She made this mistake, but it turns out where I just appreciate that she ends up being the benefactor of this mistake in a way that when she talked about gender, when men do it, and she just nailed it. Like, she managed to masterfully write exactly what she wanted. So there were no questions. And here we are still unpacking more and more of it. Like, she's brilliant. She is really, really brilliant. I'm also going to comment on Jory Starks' question. There's a difference between being immortal and eternal. Mm-hmm. Ooh, and I'm like, immortal and eternal. Immortal means you can't die. Eternal means, I feel like I almost need a dictionary definition of that, but let's like roll that around a little bit. And I don't know which one I would pick. I think Luke is eternal. Addie is
right. Well, eternal means like live on forever, right? Yeah. And then immortal is like you can't die, but you can live on forever beyond your life. So that makes you eternal, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Something like that.
I don't know which one I would choose. I don't know. But let's also, like, the piece about Henry, just like those small tidbits when she was like, yeah, Henry is exactly who I might have been if I didn't find my calling at 19. And that gave me so much more empathy for Henry, because like literally after I get off here, I'm going to my nephew's graduation party, and he's like exactly that kid. He's 18. He was like, well, maybe I'll play basketball, but maybe I'll this. And like, you're not going to the league. We've established that. Okay. But like, if you don't have this piece of your heart that is just magnificently opened to your calling, like what do you do at 18 and how hard is that? Right. It's there. But also knowing that that is her and that's her soft spot. I think that's a question we always ask, like, who is this question? Are you more Addie? Are you more Henry? And to see her say, oh, I'm absolutely more Henry, felt just such a nice piece of vulnerability that she told us about.
That part gave me chills, but also the whole reason that she wrote this book was about her mother being forgotten by her mother. That I had to go on. I just had to walk away.
Yes.
That gave me chills.
And to say, I mean, she started off, so this was in the very like 90 seconds, right? She said one of the reasons that she wrote this book, so some of you might have missed it, was her mother is her best friend. And if you follow her online, she's very close to her parents. Like, she moved to be, you know, she's moved around, but she always is very, very, she's like, they're my best friends. I spend all my time with them and her cats and their dogs. But she said her grandmother had Alzheimer's and her mother was also very close with her. So to see, and for many of us who have experienced, like even through my work through nursing or just being in healthcare, to see how debilitating a disease to be forgotten is in that way, and to have to feel this need to write about, just beautiful. That was really beautiful. And tragic.